I'd like to invite our MD, Kuki Bugoya, so that he will take you through this program. Kuki, karibu.
Good evening, guys. Karibuni sana. Thank you for such a good turnout and for making time. See a few more people still coming in. Asante, Professor, for being with us. Asante, Generali, for helping us with the discussion with the Prof. I wanted to just say a few things, basically thanking, first of all, thank you guys for coming out. Very, very grateful to see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces. This is really, really encouraging because we don't always see so many people coming out to book events on a week and on a week's notice. Kwa hiyo, first of all, please clap for yourselves, because we often hear that Watanzania wasomi, you know, we keep hearing this song that people don't read, but I think this is a testament that people still want to read, people still want to engage themselves with intellectual discussions, and especially in the time that we live in, I think it is important for our voices, our perspective, our intellectual production to be shared, to be disseminated amongst ourselves, but also with the world, because there's a danger in that there's this assumption that black and brown voices are to be put aside. And I think this is a really nice way of building that community that then sustains the kind of intellectual and literary production that this city, but many of the cities here in East Africa can really give to the world. So thank you very much. I wanted to thank Jahazi Press for publishing this amazing book, but also for their collaboration. It's a very good example of how we can build these infrastructures, build these communities where our books are shared across the border. Yazi Press is based in Nairobi. I work from Bukinayota. My name is Kuki Bugoya. I didn't introduce myself in the beginning, but that's a ushirikiano between two publishing houses to make sure that a book about us, of our experiences, is available here. So that Jahazi Press, I want to thank Alliance Française for hosting us here and for always being a supporter of literature. We host the monthly event here called Salaam, it's a Kiswahili literary event. We host it here, and many other such book launches are hosted here. So a little bit about Mkuki na Nyota, just for those who don't know, it's a publishing house founded 45 years ago. This is our 45th year. And it was founded to publish and preoccupy itself with this kind of publication, because there's always been a challenge in that we don't have a place where writers can submit their work and then that work can see and find its audience, especially books that are outside of the school curriculum. And we were founded to do just that, and we've been doing that for the last 45 years. In addition to publishing, of course, we distribute books through our bookshop, TPH Bookshop, and just to make sure that our literary activities are still thriving and are still continuing. So, without further ado, I would like to invite General.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Oh, it is a bad evening. It's a very good evening for me to be able to sit next to Mahmood Mamdani, whom I've known for a number of years. we have interacted here and there. I was reminding him, he seems to have forgotten. Last time we were in a setting, in a formal setting of discussion and conversations. It was a very interesting and curious gathering of heads of state of Africa, faced with some members of civil society in Africa. And he was one of the presenters, I think it was a question of citizenship, nationality and identity in Abuja. It was a very interesting conversation, but that's for a later session, which will involve some drinking. I'm very glad, I was very happy when Mahmood, through his publisher, asked me to be a moderator, not exactly what I'm going to do tonight. But I'm going to be one of the central actors in this conversation. Because I respect Mahmood a lot. I've read most of his works, and I know where he comes from. He is not an easy person to read if you are in a hurry. But even that will look like will sound like an understatement when you read this book, because it is quite complicated for a number of reasons. But one of them is that it mixes and weaves into a narrative a number of stories. Part of it is memoir. He's seen going, whether it's from India to Dar es Salaam, then to Kampala, then to Dar es Salaam again, then to Colombia and a couple other places in the United States, during which, it's not in the book, he managed to get the mayor of New York somewhere in between. And then the developments in Uganda and East Africa, Tanzania also, and you want to ask yourself, with all the choices he had before him, why did you, Mahmood, why did you finally settle on Uganda? You could have been Indian, you could have been Tanzanian, you could have been American, like your son. Why did you settle for Uganda?
I didn't. First, thank you for inviting me. I will answer your question in the course of what I have to say. So we don't make choices as we would wish to make them. Karl Marx once wrote that we make choices under circumstances directly transmitted from the past. I was born in a British colony, and I had I was born in a British colony, so that's the first circumstance that I did not dictate. It set the context in which I was born. The colony where I was born, India, I came from there to another colony. My parents came from there to another colony, Tanzania. From there to a third colony, Uganda. So I had no choice. Would I be hunted? I had no choice but to become familiar with the colonial context and the way it would shape my life. I went to the US to study because I finished the year of independence and the Americans gave an independence gift to Uganda, which included 23 scholarships. And I was one of the 23 kids sent to the US. So I literally ate, as we say, the fruits of independence. Many things happened in the US which changed my thinking in some ways. You can read that in the book, and I'll make reference to it later. So, I was taught in a very conventional Western education. And the conventional Western education in the field in which I was, which was political theory, states that political theory is about studying the universal good. And that is universal no matter where you are. No matter where you're born, no matter where you live, it's universal. So, what is the universal good? Western political theory was basically born in the period known as the Renaissance. And in this period, the new intelligentsia was looking for an alternative to church, an alternative to what the church was telling them was the good life. And so they looked at the period before Christianity, at the pagan period, the Romans, the Greeks, to understand the meaning of the good life. And they said the good life was not just what Christianity said, it was a universal life. My first teaching job was at the University of Dar es Salaam. At the University of Dar es Salaam, I learned something else. Not because we were conscious about it, we weren't. But we were looking for a different road. We were dissatisfied with the notion that there are universal answers to universal questions. And instead of universalism, we began to grope towards, can you hear me properly? Okay. Here we go.
Yes. Yes. You okay? Okay.
Thank you. So we began to grope towards a different destination, which I would call not universalism, but relevance. And the general claim was that the road you want to travel has nothing to do with a single answer which can be called universal. It has to do with the history that has forced you where you are and has shaped the predicaments in which you find yourself. I didn't come to theorize this until much later. Certainly not at the University of Salaam. We were doing it, but without being fully conscious of what we were doing. We arrived at a different set of questions. Whereas the question in Western philosophy, which I had studied at Harvard, the question was, what is the good life? But the questions which we began to explore in Dar es Salaam were, how did we get here? How did we get here? And how do we get out of here? These were the key important questions. Just about every book written in the 70s when I was in Dar es Salaam was consciously or unconsciously trying to deal with this question. My book is focused on decolonization, but it's not focused on the theory of decolonization. The theory of decolonization is an offshoot of the Western project, because the Western project presumes that there is something called decolonization. The Western project presumes that we can have our own conception of decolonization and add to the theory of decolonization. Not yet Uhuru. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, writing about decolonization. Frantz Fanon, writing about decolonization. Kwame Nkrumah. But everybody presumes there's an objective, a goal, decolonization. And our objective is to get there. I begin with the opposite assumption. The assumption I begin with is that all leaders who in some way were devoted to whatever they understood by decolonization, they forged their understanding in practice, through practice, not by reading books. They may have read books along the way. So I approach those I deal with in this book as leaders in quest, not necessarily from the beginning. Some from the beginning, others realizing along the road that they needed something called colonialism, and they needed to figure out how to deal with it, how to reverse its consequences for us. So I deal with several individuals. Idi Amin is the first of them. The second of them is Yoweri Museveni. The third is Kamarage JENERALI. And then the fourth, very unlikely for me and unusual for me, I put myself in there. Because one day we're having a dinner conversation, Mira, Zoran, and I. So Mira says to me, you know, the only book of yours I read, cover to cover, is your first book, From Citizen to Refugee. And you know why? Because it was not boring. Everything else you have written, I can't read more than 20, 30, 40 pages. So, okay. So Zoran said, you know, I also read that book because Mama said I must read that book to know where I was coming from. I said, all right. So he said, but listen, in this book, make sure you are in the book. Don't just talk like a wise man from a distance. As you can see, my family did not have much respect for me. I said, all right. But that introduced the idea that I must not claim to be a witness. I must own up to the fact that I was a participant in what I was writing. I must take responsibility for my participation. Fine. I'm aware I'm talking to a lot of colleagues, people of my generation, some of whom have taken responsibility, some others are still a little afraid to do so. I'm not looking at you, but I'm just. But maybe I should be looking at you. That's for another time, or for a drink. He's promised me so many drinks so many times, but he has yet to deliver one.
Thank you, Mahmood. Problem with the first question I would ask. You center your book on personalities. Yoweri Museveni and Amin. And I find that a bit disrespectful to Milton Obote because I seem to ignore Milton Obote except as some kind of footnote, not giving him any recognition as somebody who led Uganda for almost 10 years. Why?
The reason I focus on Amin and Museveni are because these are two contrasting visions of what Uganda should be. And they're also, in their own way, attempts to think of decolonization. I think of Obote as kind of, in spite of Common Man's Charter and things like that, not really trying to work through what we decolonization. Amin, for many people, is the most unlikely candidate to think of decolonization. Amin was recruited as a child soldier in the British Army. The British changed his date of birth in the official records to make him 5 years older so that he would not be considered a child soldier. Amin was cruel. Amin believed that just about anything could be resolved through violence. Amin inherited two things from his mother. One was a strong belief that Africa is for Africans. The question she did not really discuss with him is who is an African, which will come up much later. But Africa is for Africans. Amin was cruel, brutal. At the 1971 coup is the time of mass murder. Soldiers with any kind of affiliation to Obote were slaughtered. in their barracks. Amin's advisors were the British and the Israelis. The British said, you can solve the problem by assassinating Obote. The Israelis said, no. You have to solve the problem at the source. Even if you kill Obote, his colors, you will have to face them later. You have to eliminate them. They basically taught him mass slaughter. Then, I don't try and summarize the book, but...
Yes, so, Mahmood.
No, but let me summarize.
Yeah.
Something. Because, I mean, then the big turning point is Amin goes to Israel, first state visit, from there to London. He wants arms because he knows Obote's forces are being trained in Sudan and in Tanzania. The Israelis and the Brits poo-poo him, just giving some military toys. He sends his Minister of Education, Abu Mayanja, to meet Sadat in Egypt. Mayanja wires him from there and says, Sadat says, come here. He goes there, Sadat says, go to Tripoli and meet the Libyan leader, Gaddafi. He meets the Libyan leader, and Gaddafi says to him, why have you come here? He says, I need help. He says, you need help. And all the time you've been helping the Israelis to reach to the Anyanya in South Sudan, to build this mega airport in northern Uganda. You don't have a single plane which can fly from there. Have you asked yourself, what is that airport for? If you want our help, you have to help us. The first thing you can do for us is to bring peace to Sudan. Haile Selassie has agreed to hold a conference in Addis Ababa. And we want you to bring General Lago of the Anyanya to the Addis conference. Haile Selassie will make sure that his Israeli advisor is declared persona non grata. I'll skip it. There are layers and layers of background. Anyway, I'll skip that. But I can see you frowning. You give away. So, I'm trying to provoke him. He's supposed to provoke me. But, you know, he's a friend.
But Mahmoud, you haven't explained one thing. You just said there was a lot of killing of people, mass murder around time of the coup. And it's in your book, one thing that comes out that jumps in your face is this kind of exoneration of Idi Amin.
I'll come to that. I'll come to that.
Now get to it, Professor.
Because many people who have read the book, they think I'm exonerating Idi Amin. What I'm trying to give you is a view of a journey. A journey somewhere along which Idi Amin changes. Let me just focus on the general. A year after this mass murders.
No. It's just a point I picked up because it comes up at you.
So let me pick up the point too.
Yeah.
So year after mass murders, Amin organizes, stages 3 expulsions First is the expulsion of the Israelis. Secondly, expulsion of Asians, British Asians, what you would call British Asians. Okay. And third is the expulsion of the British themselves. All in 1 year. The British and the Israelis tried their very best to overthrow me over the next 9 years. Amin does not get overthrown until the Gagera War. And my thesis, well, I'll come to that. I'm sure you'll have a question to me.
You will come back to many things then.
I basically want you to become more and more curious about the book, not you. I know you've read it,
Yeah.
but our friends here. Right? But my question is, why do they fail to overthrow me? And my response is because Amin was very popular by then. Amin changed. In 1972, he changed, and you can see it through 3 major actions. You can see it when he brings back the Kabaka's body to Uganda. And he tells Ugandans, we're not just burying the Kabaka, we're also burying kingdoms with the Kabaka. Uganda is a republic. It will never have kingdoms. That's Amin's legacy. Second thing, the minor land, a British legacy like the Kabaka. British legacy where the British had distributed 8,000 square miles of land to 1,000 notables, who they made into chiefs. So there was that. Amin, after the Ethiopian Revolution, says to his cabinet, and I read all the cabinet minutes, says to his cabinet that, look, we have to learn from the Ethiopian Revolution. And the major thing is land to the tiller. And he passes a land reform bill with government, the proprietor of the land, but the tiller of the land still having his rights to till the land. Number 3, there were lots of people being killed who were coming to 85, 86. The police sent a delegation to see Amin to say, look, there are disappearances taking place. You have to do something about it. Amin appoints a commission of inquiry headed by a Pakistani judge, Muhammad Said, who had become famous earlier because under Obote, he had been a judge in a case where he ruled against the government on Obote, and he became famous. Muhammad Said is the chair, and 3 other members, one from the army, one from the police. This commission visited Uganda, different parts of Uganda, published a report over 800 pages, sent a copy to the UN. I couldn't find it in the UN library, I couldn't find it anywhere. I only found it in the cabinet library in Kampala. I read it, I was amazed, because it named everybody involved in these disappearances. The judge submitted the report and left the country the next day. He couldn't be sure because he named the head of security services, different agencies. But Amin was taking on one issue after another. Now in that report, the report absolves Amin of any responsibility. So I reread the report, so what's the logic? And I realized the logic was the same as that of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. I attended the hearing in Cape Town where de Klerk appeared before the commission and said, I take responsibility for apartheid, I apologize. Commission said no. We have no evidence that you were criminally involved. Of course he wasn't. He never held a gun, but he was politically involved. But the human rights logic is that you are not guilty unless proven criminally guilty. There's no such thing as political guilt. Read the Human Rights Watch report. Any report. It's a very narrow understanding of how the world works. It's a complete detachment of the political from the criminal. It was the same assumption that the Said Commission was working under and said Amin was not guilty. When it fell,
Can I, Mahmood, ask you another question?
I forgot, it's a good question. Amin fell. Amin fell. Why did he fall? Tell me.
Why did he fall?
Why did he fall?
I read in the book, it's because of the division in the army.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, because
Not because he provoked Julius Nyerere.
he provoked Julius Nyerere, sure. And Julius Nyerere went way beyond provocation. Against the advice of his senior army generals, his party leadership. The division that Amin responded to was between the South Sudanese who then joined the Ugandan army after the Addis Ababa conference, 20,000 of them, and the original leadership from West Nile who made the coup. And it's that split. Now, there's no clarity on why the invasion of Kagera. Some think it is further evidence of Amin's recklessness. Others think it was because of this division in his army, and he couldn't solve it or deal with it. But the third one looks at the history of Uganda, Amin-Yoweri relations, and how it reached this point. I can talk about it if you want me to.
Please.
Thank you. So, Yoweri was a champion, a self-proclaimed champion over self-determination, independence of African countries, sovereignty of African countries. And yet in this particular case, from the time Amin came to power, Nyerere adopted the objective of regime change, what we call regime change today. He wanted Amin overthrown by any means, hook or crook. And that means would include outright collaboration with British imperialism and others twice, 72 and then 78, 79. That means that included turning his head when his army leadership told him, we have the right to self-defense, but not to go Can you share with us what he was whispering in your ears?
No, he couldn't hear me clearly, so I have to push my microphone closer.
You're smart. That he didn't have to say in your ear. Okay, so where was I? I'm not good with interruptions.
Mahmoud, you are interrupting yourself, really. You are talking about why Amin attacked
Right.
Tanzania.
So Yoweri was advised, this is in Shinji's book, volume 3. Yoweri was advised by his senior military and political leadership that we have no right to go beyond the border. We have a right of self-defense. Once we cross the border, we'll be invading an independent African country. That was totally new opinion too. And yet, strangely enough, one day says to his party Secretary General, now you've been interrupted. It says to his party Secretary General that, I went to church yesterday. Yesterday was Sunday. And a voice spoke to me, said, cross the border. It sounded like Amin when he expelled the Asians and he said, God came to him in streams. But we know that that was just PR. From the very first cabinet meeting in 1971, Amin's cabinet was discussing the question of what was called the Asian question. And so, but Yoweri had this holiness that he sometimes laid claim to and other times was thrust on him. So that was the second thing, which is willing to collaborate, because the Tanzania army could not cross the river without British equipment, floating bridges. How would tanks cross the river? Yoweri wanted the British to give the bridges a donation, but we said no. You have to pay for it. Nyerere was willing to stake everything on it, including the independence of Tanzania, because everything else which followed, which included structural adjustment program, which included agreeing with the Washington consensus, was what Nyerere gambled. And when he saw that his gamble had failed, instead of taking responsibility for it, he resigned. And those who followed him had to take responsibility for it. I was amongst those people who was very strongly pro-Nyerere. I was at the University of Dar es Salaam at the time. And I was very strongly against Amin. Go ahead.
So we can say you were brainwashed?
No, my brain was developing. It was not washed. I believe we learn. This book, I talked about Amin a lot, but it also traces the learning experience of Yoweri Museveni, except in the reverse direction. Museveni begins with his thesis, undergraduate thesis at the University of Dar es Salaam, on the liberatory power of violence. And he ends in smashing the colonial state. And he ends up now building a state and is willing to use all the violence to protect that state and himself. I myself could eventually trace my own changes in the spirit of honesty my family was demanding of me. Because I realized that I had grown up in a not a racist, but a racialized environment. We lived in an Indian neighborhood built by government for lower middle class Indians. I went to a school built by government Indian secondary school. I went to a mosque, which even though it was open to Muslims, it was only an Indian mosque. My mother gave birth in a hospital, government hospital for Indians, so on and so forth. I did not become conscious of the racialized environment in which I was born and grown up until I went to the US and I participated in the civil rights struggle in Alabama. And the ambassador called me. I was put in jail. The ambassador said, no, they said you have one call. I called the ambassador. I said, get me out. I said, what are you doing interfering in the internal affairs of another country? I said, this is not internal affairs. This is the struggle for freedom. And we went through it last year, and I was beginning to realize what we had gone through. You know. So I traced the journey. In the US, civil rights struggle, anti-war struggle, the University of Salaam. So I know you've read the book, but they haven't read the book.
They will read it. They will all read it. I can assure you of that. Now let's go to Yoweri Museveni, the other main character in the book. What happened to this man? You seem to portray him as somebody who did almost everything right, all the way to Yoweri. And Yoweri, he experimented with a model of governance, structures and practices, but something happened after the 1995 Constitution, and the dispositions taken by that Constitution, the tribalization of the country, the alienation of large sections of the populace, and everything that he did just to retain power, stay in office, regardless of the principles that he had espoused before that. Do you want to tell me that this man was moving from one day to another in political terms and seeing what works and adopting that as a tactic, regardless of the strategic, ideological implication? Or do you believe, like I do, that the man was a fraud right from the word go, and he played his games in a very cynical way? Got a lot of intellectuals, because the Yoweri experience was mainly led by intellectuals, people who had gone to university, who could think clearly, and yet they could not see through Yoweri and his machinations.
So this is a big debate in Uganda.
I'll tell you what he told me.
If somebody's chairing this, that gentleman should be asked to sit down.
What do you say?
This.
What is?
Is there a chairperson here?
No, he was just warning me 5 minutes to...
I know, but why does he have to? He told us outside he was going to show us a sign. And I said, as politely as I could earlier, that I don't like interruptions. If there's a flow of thinking, let the discussion continue.
Show us signs, sir. Don't come over here. Just do like this. That is fine. For instance, okay.
Right, so there's a big debate on this in Uganda. There is a large group of critics of Museveni who believe what you're saying, which is that this guy is too smart enough to hide his real objectives. We should have seen through this from the beginning, but we failed to see through it. That's one group. The other group believes or states Museveni did not have a clear agenda from the beginning except power, and that he was willing, he was able to change with circumstances. So he changed not 95, he changed much earlier. The first visible sign was 86, when he came to agreement with Americans, the World Bank, the IMF, etc., and then on and on. 95 was his concessions to the internal opposition, mainly the Kabaga government and the establishment. Museveni, I think his own career can be seen in two phases. Phase one, he is building a power structure, but he needs popular support for it. He needs to build institutions which will bring the people together. And then the minute he comes into power, he realizes that his challenge is the opposite, which is how to make sure that these institutions don't spread in the rest of the country. How do we fragment the very people we sought to unite yesterday? That, I think, for me anyway, provides a satisfactory answer to your question.
And what about there are two people who are very different. One went to school, the other one never saw the road to the nearest school. But they all, in Yogo, they knew the importance of the utilization of the deployment of violence to achieve their aims. That is Yoweri Museveni and Idi Amin. Does it mean, after this experience, the experience of Idi Amin and Yoweri Museveni, that Uganda is now condemned to be ruled by the gun? Yoweri has...
There is no society which is not ruled by the gun, including
some more overt than others.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now we have a situation where Yoweri Museveni said, if you want to take power from me, go to the bush like I did.
He said that from the day he came to power. He said that to the Supreme Court when it ruled 3-2 that he had stolen the election 2002. And he called up the Chief Justice and said to him that, look, I'm willing to hand over, but I'll hand over to the army. So he sabotaged him. Yeah, I mean, as Mobutu Sese Seko said to the Zambian president, how can you lose an election you organize?
Q&A, I'm sure all of you will read the book. And I suspect some of you have already read the book. Now we'll take questions. Let's have a conversation. In back there, microphone.
Is this on?
Who?
Hello? I can speak nice and loudly. This was really special. Thank you very much. Very memorable as well. What other titles did you consider for the book, and why did you land on Slow Poison?
Well, thank you.
If you could introduce yourself before asking the question, please. You've already asked the question, now introduce yourself.
The order of operations is very important. My name is Mimi Stitt. I'm based here in Barcelona, but an American. I had the pleasure of interacting with you once at Columbia University, so indeed a very special occasion.
Thank you, Noyan. I mean, of course, there were many titles, but I don't remember any which seemed compelling, even at the time. I settled for Slow Poison because everybody thinks of violence as the answer to why dictators. Solidify or punish, solidify their rule, or corruption. These are the two answers. And I came to understanding violence and corruption are both common to Amin and Museveni. Violence is obvious. Amin had two choices in whom he would distribute the property to. One was the army officer, and the other were the next generation of the Uganda establishment, which had the longest commercial experience. And what happened is a confrontation between the military leadership and the Uganda establishment. And the most spectacular incident was the burning of Michael Kagwa, whose, I think, grandfather was a prime minister, had been. And he was burned to death in his Mercedes sports car at night in old Kampala. Now, the difference between Amin and Museveni was Amin did not take any of the property in any meaningful sense. I think he had a list of 90 persons from his village, etc., who got something, but nothing much. It's different with Museveni. When they signed with the World Bank and when they distributed properties, Asian properties, the main beneficiaries, you could trace them to family relationships and so on. So Amin was not personally corrupt. The regime was mired in a corruption. He was not personally corrupt. But the most important thing, I believe, was the political project. Neither violence nor corruption could amount to a political project. And this is where the two were completely different. Amin's political project was what he described as the nation. And the nation for him was the black nation. It's not he's trying to rush me up.
No, I want to get as many people as possible to make a contribution, yes. In back, I pointed out at you in the back, completely in the back.
Thank you. My name is Gibson Olokozi. I'm a PhD student at the University of Cologne, Germany. Like General said, some of us have started reading the book, and I have for the first pages. And the most interesting thing for me was how power was consolidated after some sort of mutinies that happened in the early days post-colonial, after colonialism. So my question is how Idi Amin managed to consolidate power by ensuring that there's soldiers that had mutinied obtained what they wanted, comparing to how Tanzania and Kenya reacted. And I wanted to ask you if this would have been the best option, if at all, the soldiers who were mutinied within Kenya and Tanzania would have been managed the way Amin managed the problem in Uganda. And the opposite is, was it the wrong decision, or has it been the only option that have put Uganda in the way it is now?
Amin was able to consolidate power because of the Asian expulsion. Nothing else contributed to realizing this goal as much as the expulsion. His big mistake was what to do with the fruits of the expulsion. In my view, he had a very practical and realistic alternative, which is to draw in the children of the Uganda establishment, the next generation. Because there was no other group in society which had the experience, but also some kind of a vision. The military didn't. That's why I think he. But that support did not go away. Even today, you can find matatus with signs in the back. Heroes of the Black World, which includes 4 or 5 people. Number 6, Idi Amin. You can imagine for the other 5, Mahmood Mamdani. Amin lives in the people's imagination as somebody not corrupt, somebody you could believe, whether you like him or not. I'm not championing Amin. No. I'm trying to tell you that this man was brutal and cruel in his, especially in the first phase of his life. But you can see it. He wears the lips on his face. He was, I think, light heavyweight champion of Uganda. And once he addressed the boxers, and he said, never think you can defeat a white man on points. You have to knock him out. What?
On the issue of corruption, Mahmoud, you didn't go to, well, you didn't.
I did.
You didn't go to...
Not during the war.
Not during the war.
To see the artifact of the war.
Yeah. But the corruption that we see today in Uganda, that is, you say in a book that an insider told you, we are long gone past corruption. It's no longer corruption, this is something else. Even the vocabulary we use fails to describe what we have. And this is not a new phenomenon, because somewhere I read what Kiza Besige was saying, but even in Luwero, there was a phenomenon called the difference between Abalian Koko and Abatarian Koko, meaning those who eat chicken. This is the whole situation in the guerrilla war, and those who don't eat chicken. So the differentiation was there. I think it was Kiza Besige who was saying that. So from where this was transferred to Kampala in 1986, didn't somebody see this as a canker, as a cancer that was eating at the political movement that Yoweri had started? Or did some of them see it? People like Elia Kategaya, people like Besige himself, people like Muamanya Mushega. Did they see this corruption as something that was going to bite them in the future? And is that the dissension that we saw at some stage, the dropping out of people like Bidan, Salaam?
Well, the first people to drop out were Uganda critics of Museveni's rapprochement with the Uganda kingdom and the establishment. That included Bidan, but that included, because Bidan was, after all, not part of the NRA, but that included very highly placed figures in the NRA. And it wasn't because of corruption. Corruption would come later, but it was because of the political path being chosen. They had mostly come into the movement as critics of the establishment in Uganda. And they were shocked, absolutely shocked, that the first alliance in the village would be with the power structure in Uganda.
Thank you, moderator. Felix Motion. First, Mahmood, we congratulate you. I think it's an important book. The future generations will probably come to know the genesis of the mess and the confusion that has existed in Uganda for all these years. So I think the book will be very useful in that regard. But let me also mention to you that the lens through which you have been looking at Amin would require a lot of convincing, because it varies quite significantly from the lenses with which the rest of the world, not even us, we in Africa, but the rest of the world looked at it. Let me get to specific points. You are less emphatic in the book, for what I've read of it, not page to page, as to whether Uganda could really be ruled as a unitary state. Because if you look at their situation, each of your principal individuals here have used their diversity in ethnicity for purposes of control. None of them, and I think you are less emphatic on that, but you tell us why, none of them really worked hard to unify, to bring unity among all the Ugandans. One worked hard to use military purposes for the control, the other worked hard to use political purposes for the control. That is number one. Number two.
No, let's skip to number one.
Yeah.
One is enough. I'm handing over his role, but because he will then ask me to give a very short response.
Let me conclude with the number two.
No. I've got the conclusion.
I would like to say that. I'm simply saying you have been less focused on the succession in Uganda. How would it work?
I've not been focused on succession. So don't ask me to talk about what I haven't talked about. So let me talk about what I have talked about. And now I've forgotten your number one.
Uganda as a unitary state.
If there's one person who tried his very best to build Uganda as a unitary state, it was Idi Amin. Museveni has tried the opposite. Museveni has understood that violence and corruption will not be enough, that you have to have a political project which will make it impossible for a united opposition to develop. And that's the whole project which you can describe as district making or as tribe making.
Organization?
Yeah,
Would be
or as organization from within. So, I'm sorry to cut you short, but he's transferred his anxieties to me now. The perfect chairperson. So, but you know, the thing is, look, leaders can, I'll give you a very good example, South Africa. The ANC issued a freedom charter in the 1950s, 55, I think. South Africa belongs to all those who did it. And yet the ANC, as late as 1987, would still not admit as members of ANC Indians and coloreds, and whites, of course. Only later. But the big shift, I believe, came in South Africa, not through the ANC, but through the Black Consciousness Movement, Steve Biko. Because Biko is the one who not only talked of different groups coming together, but he talked of redefining a group, black. Read Biko. Black is not a color. Black is an experience. If you're oppressed, you're black. Well, it's a revelation. To the point that the whole language, political language in South Africa changed. When you spoke of black people, you no longer spoke what was called Africans. So we can map this journey in different places at different times. And I think it's worthwhile doing it. Thank you for kind words.
Hi, my name is Sakipa. You touched on this briefly during your conversation today. You talked about spirituality a little bit, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on how the concept of spirituality is interwoven with leadership or the future of leadership from a decolonization perspective in Africa.
Spirituality. Yeah, did I get it right? You know, I wear hearing aids.
Yes.
And sometimes they are useful.
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the role or what concept or role spirituality will play in the future of leadership, particularly towards decolonization in this part of the world. You touched on it briefly in your discussion today, and I know it's played a bit of a role in our history.
Well, I think, I think that spirituality is at the core of how we understand ourselves. I think even though I started out by saying the need to de-Westernize as a first step in decolonization, but I often go back to Aristotle, know thyself. Know thyself. If you want to understand the world, begin with knowing thyself. Fortunately, he did not go to a Westernized university. He was educated in ancient Greece, which did not think of itself as Western. It didn't. So, short answer to a profound question. Thank you.
We have.
Professor Mamdani. Hello, my name is Paloma Serek, the ambassador of Spain to Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. I would like first to make a comment because in these more than turbulent times, there are few politicians that give us little hope. One is for sure my president, but other one is your son. So congratulations on that. And
I accept on his behalf.
please. And regarding the colonization, I think I have a little experience because I have served in India, Ivory Coast, Cape Verde, South Africa, Jerusalem, now Tanzania. I would like to know to what extent this slow poison is a result of the colonial legacy, and to what extent is a result of the post-independence political choices. Thank you.
It's the result of the colonial legacy being fortified in the post-independence period. Now we return to his first question. Why Uganda? Why not India? Why not Tanzania? So, the core of the colonial project was the British understood that their political economy rested on a key institution, migrant labor. Whether it was workers in plantations, whether it was traders, itinerants, or stable trade, whether it was workers in factories, policemen, soldiers, these were more migrants than local people. And the British devised a political system which separated migrants from non-migrants, which painted migration as a non-African institution, and which presumed that migrants should have no political rights. They may work in the marketplace and get benefits from it, but they should have no political rights. So this was everything afterwards. Amin managed to dismantle the notion of migrants as not having rights, but so long as they were black. Museveni reintroduced that notion. Migrants have no rights. Whoever they are, especially tribal migrants. Now, my family and its history is kind of the modern history of migration, right? My mother is born in Kigoma. My father is born in Dar es Salaam. My mother's mother is born in Lamu, right? I am born in Bombay because they went there for 2 years, 3 years, whatever. My brother is born in Dar es Salaam. My sister in Kampala. So, we're all migrants. Africans are the original migrants because we have been told over and over again that humanity originated in Africa. And from here it traveled to the rest of the world. So this notion of indigenous and non-indigenous is a colonial notion. The idea that every people have a homeland is a colonial idea. It's a modern colonial idea. Right? My next book is called Homelands. And it's a book about Israel-Palestine. And it begins with the observation that the Bible tells us that Moses led the Jews from Egypt to Israel. So what is the Jewish homeland? Egypt or Israel? Right? There's no answer, because there is no homeland. You go far back enough, if you talk to the Baganda, they will tell you that the Kintu came from the north, near the river. If you talk to the Yoruba, they will tell you that Oduduwa came from the east to the river. Every people have a migration story, without exceptions. So what is this homeland business? When do you become part of the homeland? How many years? It's I mean, this is part of the origin story which sanctifies fragmentation in Africa. You belong where you live. Simple. There is no other answer that will not just divide us. Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Sorry, before we continue, Generali, I made a promise to the audience that their books will be signed by the author. And time is running. And our time is running short. So I want just have an assurance from the author that if we continue to do the Q&A.
Are you about to expel him? How much time do you have? Can we go for another 1 hour?
We just want to be sure that he gets time to sign books. Yeah. He can make that.
No, I cannot make that promise. He sent 250 books to my friend's place, asking me to sign all of them. I signed 50, 60, and I said, no, I can't sign anymore. Now he wants me to make a promise that I will sign all of them here. No, I can't.
What shall we make as an arrangement? You sign how many here?
I don't know, until I'm tired.
Okay, so that works.
Okay, then let's have how many more questions?
Walter, your son is a real entrepreneur.
Okay, decide, yeah.
Hello, thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. My name is Peria. I'm a researcher based here in Salaam.
My vision is not very good, but I thought I saw a hand here.
Shito?
Hapa, huku. Kulia kwangu, huku. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
The military takeover.
I haven't read the book yet, but there are some themes discussed here that I'd like to sort of bring to your attention. And that is the sort of politicization of ethnicity and how both leaders sort of used it to their own benefit, if you will, before eventually sort of, before eventually the starting of it. So I'll focus on the Banyarwanda community in Uganda, some of whom were there before the revolution in 1959 in Rwanda, and how initially they were discriminated against by Milton Obote before Amin sort of absorbed them into the government bureaucracy. And then again, they were discriminated against by Milton Obote, and then Museveni sort of absorbed them into his armed struggle. And then when he captured power, he eventually sort of engaged in some sort of discrimination against them again. Now, this continued
Please don't make a statement. Ask a question.
Yeah. So the question that I'm asking is, how can, in constructing a modern state right now, and given all the violence that's sort of arisen as a result of the politicization of ethnicity, how can we overcome it within the greater East Africa and more specifically the Great Lakes region? Thank you.
Okay, this is how I understood the question. The premise of the question is, Africa has cultural diversity, which has led to political tensions, right? Is that the, where are you? You lost me. I'm not. Is that
the asker of the question?
Yes, it's clear.
Yeah, so am I summing up your question correctly? Does cultural diversity necessarily translate into political tensions?
No, I'm asking how can we overcome the politicization of cultural diversity to achieve.
Okay, it's the same. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same. Why does cultural diversity get politicized? You can sum it up as the ambition of the colonial project. The colonial state is constructed on the basis that your political rights depend on your cultural claims. And your cultural claims have to be indigenous, have to establish yourself as indigenous. The solution for us is to recognize that the problem is the politicization of culture, as you stated, that we need to depoliticize culture. What does that mean? To politicize culture is to say that you come from a particular territory and that your political rights depend on the territory from which you originate. Each step in the argument forces you to accept a premise. But you have to read the book. But also in Rwanda, I would say, I wrote another book after the Rwanda genocide called When Victims Become Killers. And that's the book which addresses the Banyarwanda question, the Tutsi question, the Hutu question, the Twa question. I would respectfully suggest you might get more from that book than from this current one, even though it will reduce some bookies' sales.
Yeah. Just yeah. Microphone.
My name is Sherelle Quayle, and this is the perfect time to ask my question. A few months ago, I read the book Dancing in the Glory of Monsters about the Second Congolese War. And in that book, there's descriptions of ferocious battles between the Ugandan army and the Rwandan army in DRC. It also gives a very detailed history about Kagame's upbringing in Uganda. And today with the current war, we hear a lot about Rwanda. What is the role of the Ugandan state in the current status of Eastern DRC?
What is the role of
Uganda. It currently, in the state of the war in current affairs in Eastern DRC?
First of all, I will write a book to which that would be an appropriate question. Because this book is not about that. But of course, the Ugandan state has been deeply involved in the question of Rwanda ever since the RPA came into power. The RPA was a section of the Ugandan army. Its leadership came out of the leadership of the Ugandan army. It was a solution to an internal Ugandan problem where Museveni had initiated an amendment to citizenship which would have reduced the requirement for citizenship to 5 years residence. And there was an uprising amongst the Buganda elite which said, how can this be? All the Banyarwanda will become Ugandans. And the Ugandan army will become a Banyarwanda army. And Museveni's solution, this is perfect, Museveni. Tactical solutions without any strategic thought. Right? Perfect solution to a problem, which then it blows up into something bigger because his solution is to send in the Ugandan army with the RPA. And then from then on you can follow the transcript.
Should I?
Yes.
Thank you. Professor Mamdani, first of all, this is an absolute delight to hear from you. So thank you. I'll start by asking where you ended the question on the comment rather, that how do you lose an election which you organize? That seems to be the trend globally. Maybe to introduce myself, I'm Shabnam Malik and I work for the United Nations in Tanzania. And the current trend is basically telling globally, human rights are of course becoming a thing of the past. Declaration of Human Rights sounds like a fiction from the very members who have signed some of those. What would be given your background, what you're teaching in Colombia, what would be your advice where institutions tend to fail and we tend to build institutions? That's the support we give traditionally, but clearly that traditional model is not working. What would be your advice and your reflections on it? Thank you.
Look, you have to draw a line somewhere, right? So, I don't know. Did Mkuki ask you to come here with all the questions in your mind which you wish could be answered? Then that's not me. I mean, human rights it's a hugely problematic issue from the time of its conception. So, again, if you come out of this meeting with a list of questions not answered, but you consider important, urgent, I think that's good enough. One impression I'm getting through because I did a book talk in Nairobi, and this one here, and in Mombasa, and I'm going to South Africa. One impression I'm getting is that we're sort of at the death of intellectual discussion in these countries. And just the attendance and the wide range of questions and the attempt to make them relevant to my book suggests to me that there are very few opportunities for people to discuss this. I mean, Nairobi, we had a hall like this one, and 1,000 people registered instead of 250 or 300. And the publisher had to get another hall, and he even charged money, pensions. And even then, next day he reserved the same hall again. telling me like, don't you feel responsible? Now, because you go on the second evening, they won. Where's the? I felt very responsible then. But now I'm beginning to think that this is a sales strategy. But I'm sorry. Since it's not in my book, I can answer it. Or I can answer it.
Please answer it.
Yes, I will answer. What's the question? Human rights.
Well, looking at the global trend, what would be your advice from the vantage point of where we are doing the commiseration and all of these at the moment? But the way forward seems to be really very limited. Or your experience probably shows us something that we can apply now. Thank you.
I don't think the question is really way forward. I think the question is where are we? Because we're always thinking that we are not where we should be. And we always have a notion of where we should be from some pipe dream, not from the real place where we are. And so, when I was teaching at the University of Salaam, we used to have this concept called underdevelopment. It's like human rights question. So why are we underdeveloped? And then some people began to ask, what is underdeveloped? And what is developed? I tell my students that, look, you're my students and I'm a professor. And if I define you as not yet a professor, meaning that I think that your future is to be professors. But that's not the only future. But there are many futures. And do not presume what they call teleological thinking. We are primitive, agriculture, slavery, industrial. Everything goes in the straight line. No. People make different futures. So the underdeveloped thinking led us nowhere. Really, it led us to a complete dead end and non-recognition of the problem. I think I was referring to South Africa earlier and Idi Amin's Commission of Inquiry. So the human rights problem splits the criminal from the political. Never asks the question, what is the political problem? Never. Well, so you have an international criminal court, and then you have separate from it, ICJ, what is it called? Yeah? Huh? Yeah. Two separate things, one to deal with the political, the other to do with the criminal. What nonsense is that? You know, I think it's nonsense. There'll be other books, other talks.
I don't know.
Huh?
Walter.
Mzee Walter Drummond. Horse right.
Do you consider
the University of Dar es Salaam contribution to one aspect of the slow poison, one character. And the slow poison, the University of Dar es Salaam contribution to the character that is part of the slow poison. Because, for instance, Museveni's reading after Fanon was the Soviet military review. In other words, he was a militarist from the word go. How was it that the University of Dar es Salaam at that time, and maybe even later, possibly even today, because he still has surprisingly quite a lot of followers here, who still think he's relevant in terms of the old ideas and discuss and so on. So I just want to raise the point that maybe there's also some work to be done is the process of the evolution of this character who forms part of the slow poison.
I would welcome a discussion at whatever point, a critical discussion of the University of Dar es Salaam in the 70s, of what we can learn from it, and what lessons we can draw, which should not just be an embrace. But I think it has to be a group discussion. Group discussion of several people like yourself, others. Where did we go wrong? Because we asked ourselves that question when we began the project at Makerere. And I was very dissatisfied with the Dar es Salaam experience. And yet very clear that it was the first breach in the hegemony of a certain kind of thinking. This is not the time or place to pontificate on that. He says yes. Yeah.
So, I think I agree. I'm not saying no, it is. I'm agreeing with you. How we structure that conversation will depend on many things. You can do a Zoom.
Hello. I hate Zooms. I don't like, really. Isn't it the fear of being in the same room?
Yeah, obeying imperatives. If you're in Colombia and I'm in Dar es Salaam, how do we communicate with 5 others or 6 or 10? Now we'll have the last question from a lady. If you're a lady, just stand up. How many are you? How many ladies are there?
Half the audience.
No, one. Let's start with this one here, then we'll finish with this one here.
Okay, my name is Franca. I understood that you had quite some research into these different leaders, but that you also wanted to acknowledge their participation. So I was wondering if you had a similar reflection or research on your own life. On your own life and participation.
It's there in the book. Yeah, it is. You give the credit to the mayor and his mother for saying, don't write another boring book. So, please read the book. Huh? You will enjoy it.
The last lady here.
Hello? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Catherine Buckle. I'm a research consultant working in the development sector based in Dar es Salaam. I'm really curious about what the repercussions are when you write a book like this, and you talk about all of the things that these leaders have been doing. Of course, Museveni is still around. Like, what are the consequences of that? Is there any reaction from the Ugandan government? Is there any kind of negative reaction or backlash? And how do you manage that?
I mean, I came from Kampala 5 days ago. I'm going to South Africa, and from there I'm going back to Kampala. I didn't expect the government to applaud me. No. I mean, I believe that unless you push against limits, you can't stretch them. I mean, it's absurd to expect approval if you are a critic. I mean, a critic has to expect the kind of responses power normally gives to critics. Now, of course, there are different kinds of responses. So I don't expect to be offered a government prize. I'm happy to be left alone to do my work. Our son got married in Kampala. Just what? July.
The short answer to that is don't expect to be given any prizes by government. All you can pray for is that they don't shoot you.
I wasn't going to say that.
So thank you, Mahmood. Thank you very much for this time that you had with us. I'm sure you have whetted the appetite of your audience, and they will be expecting now, and you brought this one on yourself, to sign.
You're going to go out for a bit?
Yes.
And then I'll be back.
Yes.
I don't promise you when.
Okay, a round of applause.
Okay, thank you guys for coming, and we're going to do a signing. We're going to have the signing inside. So you can grab your books and come back. We'll wait for Mamdani to come back.
Someone's going to be like yeah, exactly.